Hey guys, it's Larry. Welcome to Story and Wealth Transfer. Well, today's going to be interesting, but it's probably going to be offensive. And I'm going to go down a path that maybe, I just feel like I should. I feel like we should be able to have a really candid conversation, but I already know that a lot of you aren't going to necessarily like what you hear me say. And it's not because I'm not saying what I think is the truth, and I'm not stepping into weird ground, I don't think theologically, as much as just where we're at in this whole thing with our country and what in the world is going on. And can you conceive of how bad it might really be and yet how good God really is? And so I believe that God has got great things for us, but we don't need rose-colored glasses. We need to really understand, what's going on. So, I just got back from a great fishing trip, second year that I've done it, with a number of days trip up to northeastern Washington, which is, 9-hour drive, almost 600 miles, with my nephew. And he's not a passionate follower of God, but he knows God, and I love who he is, and he's got all kinds of good things about him. He's highly educated from a Christian, from a Catholic secular school, an elite school in Washington called Gonzaga, and people know about that place. It's intellectual paradise. I didn't go to schools like that. I love debating though, and one of the cool things about my nephew and I is we don't see everything the same, but there's nothing off bounds, and we have very passionate debates about the way that things are and the way that they should be. And he gives me a lot of leeway in my areas of probably knowledge and experience. And then he just totally calls me out and doesn't give me much leeway. And it's really a good experience for me to understand a passionate debate. And so, but the thing is, we love each other, and it makes us closer because we argue, but we don't resort, almost, unless I'm really getting beat really bad by him, then I might do some name calling. No, we don't do name calling. We have a great time. But I'm going to talk about things that are offensive today. And they go against the narrative of what our culture is told is okay. And I don't think that some of you are going to be able to take it, but I think that it might be good for you to understand it, because shouldn't we be concerned about the truth? And I'm not trying to do this, big philosophical whatever. I mean, I remember getting my mind twisted in philosophy class from a Christian professor. And I'm not trying to do this theologically, but I think that our minds can't conceive of things financially, what's really going on, because we just want things the way that we think they are. It's just so nice to have a little bow on it and just assume that you can continue to save money and you're making the safest, best idea. Well, you can continue in that future nightmare course if you want to, or you can deal with the reality that our currency's on fire. And I've got some pretty empirical proof at the end of this that's going to show that, things are changing. And I want you to change ahead of everybody else so that you can get there. But for you to get there ahead of everybody else, you're going to have to deal with some realities that the mainstream media is not telling you. And Kim Clement calls them prognosticators, and he calls them really the prophetic voice of the dark side. The media is. And yet it's so funny that people will see things and then they'll go to the media and got to watch the news. Well, they got me a bunch of times on that, and I'm going to start talking about events that I don't think are the way that we were told they were. And so I'm going to come to current events that we're all talking about, but I don't think history was the way that it was. And, just to go way back, and I don't know what you know about this, and I haven't read at all to the degree of some people, but I remember these stories of Nero, listening to the violin while Rome burned. Well, what that kind of reminds me of a little bit is Lahaina. And some of you may have wildly different perspectives, and it's okay. You can be different. You can talk about it. If you talk about it properly, I'll let you voice, you can say all kinds of things about me today, and I'll let you do it. But I don't think that Nero let it burn for the reasons that history often says. I think that he was happy to have the Christians take the blame. He wanted the slums to be cleared out so that he could build more grandeur and amazing buildings. And, I'm not any expert in that history, but I think that that's probably true. That's one of the earlier examples of leadership saying one thing, doing something else, but you have to have a narrative. And unfortunately, leadership has moved more towards narratives than reality, and we're very simple if we think that we believe things. You're going, well, give me another example that's more recent, Larry. Well, what about 9/11? Oh, here we go. He's a truther. He doesn't believe in 9/11. Oh, I believe it. It happened. How many buildings fell down? Tell me. I know you're going to think that I'm going to say it's only 2, but I know for a fact it was 3. And if you said 2, then you don't know about building number 7, but it's an empirical fact. Building number 7 fell down, and we all think that there was 2 airplanes. I think the one that I've seen a picture of wasn't a passenger plane. It was a lot more like a military plane. But, then there goes your conspiracies. Well, I don't believe the way that we're told. I mean, you look online and you see where a jet hits a big bird up in the air and it can dent the nose of the plane. When the plane's going 400 miles an hour or whatever, 500, it dents the plane. They don't hit them when they're up in the air because they can't fly that high, but they're coming in for a landing at 300 miles an hour, hit a bird or whatever, and it dents the plane sometimes. Yet that plane was able to fly all the way through a building that was actually designed to not allow a plane to take it down. And yeah, weird stuff. Building 7, though, no plane, it did go down. It was insured fully by a financier who got, just months before, very expensive 100% insurance coverage that even covered planes or whatever, and it just folded down like crazy things. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's controversy about JFK. I don't know about that. I remember when his brother or whatever, I mean, in the late 60s, I was old enough to remember that. I think we're told things, and I don't know that they're always true, but we have to know what the truth is, and, we need to prayerfully seek what the truth is. And so I guess, maybe I shouldn't be so candid because you might think less of me, but I'm somebody who's not going to lose too much sleep if that happens. I'm going to try to do what God wants me to do, and I think what God wants me to do is to talk to you about something and I'm going to try to influence you and hopefully get you to have a view of something that you probably don't have the view. And so, but I'm talking to you about honestly and candidly about some of the crazy things I have to deal with. And, I don't know everything. I sure don't know everything. I do know some things, though. And the things that I know, as I look back on my 61 years, when I don't do what everybody else did, I usually do a lot better. And I've noticed guys like Warren Buffett. I'm not comparing myself to Warren Buffett, but he doesn't do what everybody else does, and he doesn't tell people what he does. I'm trying to tell you what I think is true, and I think Kim Clement as a prophet is real, and I think that he saw things coming. I think this wealth transfer is real. I don't think the wealth transfer is about money. It's about influence during this time of an apostolic reformation that's coming, and I believe that God has huge plans to change everything, including his church and the government and everything. And, you go, well, why do you think that, Larry? Well, I've watched other prophetic voices besides Kim Clement, like David Wilkerson, and he had this experience called The Vision. And it's unfortunate you can't buy the book today. They could make a lot of money. I'd love to buy it, but it's like, $1,000 or hundreds of dollars. Can't even buy it. And, it should be $12 or $20, and I'd buy one in a heartbeat. But luckily, it's on YouTube, and it's a long series, and you can watch it. They made a good movie of it, and people post it for free. But, there's other people who aren't so big name. There's a girl named, she goes by Brand P on YouTube, but I think her name is Brandy Potter because I think she's on Instagram. The reason I remember her name is because it's really how I ended up meeting Evangelist Lauren Atkinson, because we had both gone to the same video, because she had some amazing videos about silver, Vietnamese dong, about the government changing, and a government in the future is going to be way different. And I think she was right in everything she did. And then nobody's commenting on these videos. They're like 2 years old, because she pretty much has left YouTube, which is very unfortunate, because like her and this other guy named Drew were amazing. I loved both of them. I didn't always understand what they were saying. I didn't listen to every word, just like you don't listen to every word I say. But, I've tried to reach out to both those people. I could see why she didn't reach out to me, but I thought Drew would, but he didn't. But they've had views and visions of what is coming, and it helps us understand. I think it's a real advantage to believe in the prophetic, but it's hard to discern. And, so there's people who are in, and I refer occasionally to the Patriot movement, and they're not all wrong, but they sure aren't all right. And so, the balance is we know in part and we prophesy in part, and then, we have wisdom and intellect. And I'm trying to help you see how I think I see things, even though I don't know these things, and I can't prove what I'm saying to you today, but I want you to look differently, because Kim Clement always encouraged us to not be victimized by the media. I mean, he talked about the dark voice of the media, they're prognosticators. I mean, they tell you what to think, and they speak fear and lies, and they don't have God's perspective, and yet so many people just want to hear what the media says, when, I intentionally try, to avoid mainstream media. I want to show you some video that I took when I was up in North Central Washington that's related to crazy things I saw. One is, well, really, they're both direct confirmations of what Kim Clement talked about. Kim Clement talks about an immigrant crisis in the United States. Immigration is going to change greatly when his David comes back. I think there could be some very dark times when Kim talks about this time of pandemonium. Drew Wyatt had a dream about armed soldiers that were shooting in the streets, and I don't think that those were necessarily U.S. soldiers. I think they may not have been. I'm not sure. I don't know him. I wanted to ask him, but I can't get a hold of him. I've had dreams of uniformed soldiers shooting in our city. They were in large municipal areas. It was related to Donald Trump. I don't, fully understand that. But I believe that we're going to have horrendous events that are very forthcoming. And I think August is going to be, as Kim Clement, I've said, warns, it may be the worst August in the history of America, and pandemonium is the best way to probably describe what's coming in August, September, October. Coincidentally, the next August, September, October must be, because it sure wasn't last September, October, are going to be really good. He talks about how the financially it's going to be really improving, and that's not been that way. But so I'm going to share this story of the immigrants, share the story of really a confirmation of between two wealth transfer items of we're going across the bridge. We're going underneath the bridge on the boat up to the Canadian border. I mean, this is a town of 300. There's like no cars. I mean, this is just an isolated part of Washington. But as we're going underneath the bridge yesterday, the two big buses come by. And I looked at the guide and I go, what in the world are those buses doing up here? We're in the middle of the wilderness almost. I mean, you know, not really, but on the edge of the wilderness for sure. And he goes, well, what do you think? And I go, well, I'm wondering about, and we say at the same time, immigrants. And because I am friends with a state senator that we have, which, you know, he doesn't go to Washington, D.C., he reports to Olympia, and you are watching, many of you are watching Joe Kent. So, you know, I believe as you come into the wealth transfer, and even now, you should be engaged in campaigning and influencing who our governors, our governance will be. But anyway, I was talking to a state senator, and he got some very concerning reports that there are huge numbers of immigrants coming in from the northern border, right here where I'm at. I'm 6 miles from the border, 5 miles from the border of Canada, right here. And we see two huge buses going across an isolated road. There's nothing up there. There's nothing up there. It's like, this is the craziest thing. And but the senator told me, he goes, Larry, I want you to guess how many the Border Patrol along the state of Washington is getting every day, you know, capturing, you know, intervening in. And I'm like, well, Jeff, I don't know, 3, 2, 1. I mean, I don't think any, hardly, right? He goes, no, give me a big number. I go, 12? I couldn't imagine they catch 12 a day. He goes, nearly 10 times that much every day they're capturing along the Washington border. I mean, we are having, and I go, well, he goes, guess who they are? And I'm sitting there thinking, well, I don't know why Mexicans would go through, but there's a lot of, you know, I don't really mind them. They're immigrants. They're not probably legal, a lot of them, but I mean, I like them and whatever. And I wish that we had a more clear-cut system. He goes, no, Larry, these aren't Mexicans. He goes, the number one kind is Chinese. And I'm going, what? You know, the second one is Ukrainian. And the third one is Arabic, you know, a variety of Muslim nations. And I'm like, oh my goodness. I mean, that you just don't see those kind of people. But that's what the guides said. He goes, yeah, he goes, we're pulled over occasionally if we get too close to border things, or because he fishes right along the Washington, British Columbia border. So I just think that's interesting. I think that there's evidence of that that's coming. I don't think that these people are just stacking up in Washington State. I think they're all over the country. Second thing, I come to this resort. I'm talking to the owner, who I know because I've come before, and he actually has a self-storage, and so he likes to talk to me. He said, hey, I want to get the internet up here so I can do stuff. And he goes, I'm renegotiating my internet. And I'm like, well, that's not really a big deal to me. He goes, no. He goes, it's crazy. He goes, who do you have? I go, well, I have T-Mobile. He goes, that's awesome. And I'm sitting there thinking, in my experience, T-Mobile's not so great, but it's an affordable option. And he goes, no, T-Mobile has negotiated with Starlink, and right now, in this part of Washington, you know, it used to be so hard to get cell service, and Starlink is extending text coverage anywhere you're not covered by a canopy of trees. So if you walk out into an open field, or, you know, some openings, you can text anywhere up in the mountains. Like, it's never been that way before. And I immediately thought of what I've talked about, that between the number 4 and what I would say is the number 5 wells of blessing that Kim Clement predicted. He said that, and those are my numbers. He doesn't give the chronology, unfortunately, but that's part of the mystery and it's part of the fun. But Brixton Metals, who I've got a little bit of information about, is probably going to be the 4th one, since it's the one that we know the most details, one of the 4 that we most know the most details about. And then Kim prophesies that between Brixton Metals and Two Crowns, let me tell you, Kim said, let me tell you that Apple is going to have a disruption in and a new competitor as a competing network is going to rise up. And guess who has to do it? I mean, it's not like there's nobody that's already making, the same guy who makes electric cars, who makes a boring machine, who helped start PayPal. And, the list just goes on and on and on. He bought Twitter. Elon comes to the rescue, and he's, got Starlink, who's now negotiating with T-Mobile. And this guy said in the fall, toward the end of the year, they've told him that you're going to have full video anywhere in the mountains because Starlink is going live. Holy smokes. I'm reading that prophecy over the last 2 years. I finally thought I'd bring it up because it's such a crazy thing. And here I have a really cool guy who lives right up in the corner of Washington, beautiful country, and he's telling me Starlink is connected to T-Mobile, and they're going to be full video, full internet. He goes, it's going to be ridiculous speed right in the middle of the forest, all over, probably all over the world. So that's what's coming. So let me share some more ideas that I have that, are weird. I'm going to allude to two things that are, you might go, you have no business talking about it, but these are things that I think and other people think, and you probably don't think it. But do you know who Big Mike is? Well, there's a lot of people, including myself, who think that Michelle Obama was Michael. And Joan Rivers used to think that too, but as soon as she said it and was recorded, she ended up dying that weekend. And you might go, well, that's horrible. You couldn't even do that. I've told a few people that. They get so mad. I think that there's probably evidence of that. And I don't think that he's the only world leader that has done the same thing. And I don't know if you follow the debate, but I think it brings it to something we should talk about because I like Candace Owens. I'm not Candace Owens. I wouldn't do what she does all the time, but she's just wade in the middle of a big mess with Piers Morgan, and Piers, Candace is going to win. She's very smart, obviously, and but she said that Macron, and the leader of France, is also married to a man, and she supports this person. And Piers Morgan, just had a cow and bet her $100,000 or euros, whatever it was. She's married to an extremely wealthy guy. I think she probably makes a lot of money herself too, and she didn't back down. I don't know if she's followed Piers' bet. It really doesn't matter to me, but I've seen both of them talk about it. And she says, I've read everything. It tracks Macron's spouse, who was a male, and his gradual transition and all the receipts. And it looks like we live in a world ran by pedophiles or transsexuals, and they don't want us to know it, but that's who they are. And if that's who they are, then they've got different values than people who are traditional, with Judeo-Christian values. And so we need to know that. And I don't know that I think it's like salacious gossip. It's like, if that's true, we need to know that. Well, there's other crazy things that maybe we should know too. And, this just gets into, like I said, it's awkward to talk about it. But, I'm going to tell you something that I can't figure out about this Trump thing, the Trump assassination. I totally believe that God told Brandon of Last Days Ministries that the president there's going to be an assassination attempt. He calls it. I mean, the guy's amazing. Brandon nailed it. And yet, I'm not sure what really happened. And the reason that I'm not sure is because I actually know quite a bit about a few guns, because when I was 11 years old, I bought a Ruger 1022, which began production the year after I was born. So for 60 years, we've had this 22, which is a very small round, and you can't even hunt deer in most, I don't think, any state with a 22. A 22 Magnum is a whole different thing, more than twice as much power, and it will definitely kill. But there's big arguments other than putting a 22 right up somebody's head if you could even kill with it. And this might be like totally emotional to you, and you might be going, well, what in the world are you doing, Larry? I mean, you don't believe that Trump was almost assassinated? I don't know. I know what I was shown. I know what I saw, but I don't know if what I saw was what really happened. I mean, there's even the miraculous photograph of a bullet that's going exactly right in, apparently right by his ear, but it's a rudimentary gun for, kids essentially, or, for plinking and having fun, but it's not an assassin's rifle. It's a very poor tool at more than 20 feet away to, really know that you're going to kill somebody. And it's kind of a joke. And I don't know why anybody would think that you could kill somebody, because you can't even legally hunt deer with them, which are very fragile, humans weigh, Trump is twice as big as a lot of deer. And you don't think you can kill a human from over 150 yards away, probably with a 22, unless they were extremely unfortunate or you were really lucky. I mean, you could totally put an eye out, you could make them bleed, you could damage them, you could maybe even paralyze them. It depends where you hit them, but I don't think it would kill somebody. Not like any other bullet. It's so small. It's the smallest thing. And what I'm saying is, what we saw is, I don't think what we saw. And the other thing is, on the microphone, I heard all the gunshots sounded the same way. Well, I mean, they could have had noise reduction on the big rifles, but they're shooting, sniper rifles are like, I think 308s, and I'm not a big, huge, gun guy, but they have big guns that are very, very, very loud. And I didn't hear any difference between his shots and the other shots. So I don't know what happened there. I don't know if I should even tell you that all these things, but we're having a candid conversation here. But what I do want to tell you is, I want to have a conversation about what would be the antecedents of God beginning to prepare the way. One of the things that I see with Kim Clement is that he says that God had a plan for what he's doing. And it's a plan that God shared with men. And I believe it's the idea that there is a plan that the good people have that is going to bring about the restoration of America, really a reformation that's coming. I mean, we are going to get to reform. We are going to see the current systems of this world in our country, beginning with our country, fall down. And we're going to be able to strip them away. We are going to be people of influence, growing influence, as we have resources. And we're going to step up in each of our own communities as the government changes, as there becomes a vacuum. You and I are going to step up. I got a text today from 2 different city council members in our own city. We are having a flag waving event to, memorialize and patriotize. And, as patriots, we're going to go thank God that our president is safe. And so even though I have this tension of wondering what really happened or how it happened, who was behind it, what did they know, what's going on, I'm all for this, because we need to stand up in our own little areas, and we need to make our voices known, and we need to begin to make a difference. And I believe that what's going on, I'm going to share with you how, when I first heard the word COVID, I happened to be in Cuba, and it was actually my second trip to Cuba. And one of the most shocking things was I've read about a lot of the history of Cuba because I found it fascinating. And I don't. This might be insensitive for me to share this the way. Of course, Larry, you're normally so sensitive, so that's be highly unusual for you, wouldn't it, Larry? Well, not necessarily, but I'm gonna say that there are cultural differences, and I'm always fascinated by the cultural differences that even language alone would have. So, I mean, they say that Spanish is more of a romance, the Latins or whatever are more romantic, and I don't doubt that. Um, I think of like Castro as a dictator and a mean, evil man. I mean, that's what we're told. What's interesting is the Cuban school system has taught those kids, and the missionaries I was with, they were on the missions video I had with the couple that was older than me. I interviewed their kids. I don't want to say their names right now, but they're in there. I support them. I love them. I was with them over there. And they hired a girl who was a local who needed the money because a lot of Cubans don't have, consistent work and stuff because there's not any money there. And, they have a hard time making $20 a month, honestly. So it's pretty hard to live. So if they can get $20 for, being the speaker of a bus full of Americans, I mean, they jump at that, and that's probably what they got for the hour tour that we provided the bus, but they provided the speaking. And the craziest thing this girl did is she goes, yeah, our Castro, we fondly remember him as a poet. And I thought, what? And I'm listening, and it's like, yeah, Castro was an amazing poet. And so I thought, what kind of culture fondly remembers a national leader as a poet? Because a poet is a pansy in America from my generation. I know that, I'm not from the trigger generation. I'm one of the last years of the baby boomers, so I'm very insensitive and, whatever. Probably shouldn't be having this conversation. But I come home, buy this book. It's on Fidel Castro. I read the history. And actually, I think that tour happened the first time. I think I read the history, so I knew it the second time. So when this happened again, I think the tour guide said the same words, that he was a poet. That's really crazy. He had words that he used. But the history of Castro, it's almost like the inverse. It's like a fairy tale that he was able to do it. I don't know how it happened. It was like the devil really got lucky because his attack was a bunch of like dope smoker drinkers or whatever. I mean, they weren't like the most productive. They were kind of like hippie kind of people or whatever during I think it's the late 50s. They were pretty casual about it, but they wanted to stir it up. They were intellectuals from liberal institutions at the time, and they somehow got enough money that scraped together, bought a big old wooden boat that wasn't any great thing. 70 people on a 70-foot boat make the 4-day trip across, toward the Caribbean from, I think, Mexico, or maybe it was Central America, and they end up coming up to the shores of Cuba, and they met some military resistance, so they had to go to a swampy area where the military couldn't follow them, and they lost half their supplies, and they end up getting stuck in the jungle, the way I remember it. And I'm just telling you the way I remember it. They end up, I mean, it was just a disaster. It was one of the most unorganized assaults from a very small thing, and I don't think they were even taken seriously by the government. But what Castro did is they ended up in the hills over Havana, I think it was. They ended up taking over this mountain, and then the government really didn't want to go up there because it was in the jungle, and they did have a lot of guns. They had a fair bit of people, 40-some people probably. And they took over a radio station and they started talking about the virtues of communism and socialism. And Castro began to just tickle their ears with all these, one-sided truths, some truths, some lies. If and they were quite prosperous. I mean, the history of Cuba at that time, their greatest prosperity is behind them. I mean, it's a wreck now, but it was quite the beautiful place. But you're telling these people, so there was tons of rich people. But most people were common people, just like most societies. And those common people heard that, maybe they could be better off or more equal. And so they knew they weren't rich like a lot of the people. And so they began to believe the lie. And Castro, over many months, in the most ridiculous way, ends up turning the views of the people. It reminds me of like the story of Absalom, where he continually tickled the people's ears, told them a lie, complimented them, and he turned the heart of a nation towards a lie, and then he carried out the lie, and it was because the heart of the nation was turned and ready to receive it that when they finally did get to shooting, a lot of people were willing to go along with him. And that's such an important part of taking over a nation, is you have to have people to be willing to follow. And so here's the offensive part of today is, I think that what we just witnessed was maybe a weird part of a plan that I don't think anybody who's ever shot or played around with a 22 thinks that you can kill somebody from 300 yards away with a 22. And we do have somebody who, quote, died, but I don't think you can kill somebody with a 22. You can make them bleed. I don't doubt that. You can shoot it up in the air. It'll definitely go, probably even maybe a mile if you angled it right. And when it came down, it would hurt. But I don't think that's what happened. And I think it's part of the plan of God. It reminds me of Ashley Babbitt, who I said at the time, and I've said in front of our local leadership at our Republican Party, I studied the Ashley Babbitt story. She's the girl who theoretically was like a firefighter, owned a pool company, was married to a guy, and her mom theoretically, is known by Trump, and they give credibility to the story, but she was carried out after being shot by that hand of that guy who was released in the Senate chambers or wherever, he did. There was a story there that led to the incrimination of all these J6ers, because there was a story, there was a narrative, and they showed you what happened, and most people believed what happened. I didn't believe what happened because I was there. My brother didn't go in. He's been interviewed 2 or 3 times by the FBI because his cell phone left signals that he was close to the front door, so they came to and talked to him about if he went inside. And it's interesting that technology was used in the way that it was. But what are you trying to say, Larry? I'm trying to say that I totally believe that God gave prophetic words to people. But, Julie Green talks about the Biden. She doesn't give him credibility as Joe Biden or President Joe Biden. She won't call him that because I don't think he's that either. And I think she doesn't think he's that. But he is the Biden to her because we are seeing whatever we're seeing, but it's part of the plan of God because people are influenced by narratives. They're not necessarily influenced by the truth. They're influenced by what they're told. And Nero let Rome burn, and he blamed the Christians. And so he was able to hurt his enemy, and he was able to clear out the slums. And those slums are probably like it is now in often parts of the Philippines, where the poor people have built, and you don't have the political will to remove them, but they don't have title to the land. And so I think Nero just claimed the land. And, this is not what I have an expertise about. But political people have learned that if you create events and control the narrative, you can sway the people and things happen. And 9/11 really swayed the people. Columbine, I remember Columbine and, and Sandy Hook. Those are things that were very big events that when you start to look back on it, they're very odd and there's inconsistencies. And you might be going, Larry, you are so insensitive to even have these conversations. Well, when you realize that powerful people use events to change the will and the narrative of the people, are people smart to be swayed when they use the media? Because the media is totally controlled. It's very ungodly, and I want you to know that. And so I'm having to wrap my head around, would God give godly people prophetic words about an event that is crafted as part of the plan of God to begin to shift momentum for a nation? And I'm wondering about that. That's what I wonder about. That's a crazy thing to admit, but that's what I wonder about, because I've shot thousands of 10-22 long rifles out of a Ruger 10-22, and I can't hit a banana from more than 100 yards away. And to be able to hit a plate at 300 yards with a Ruger 10-22, I'm going to tell you it's about impossible. And that's what this guy did. He hit an ear, and it's an impossible shot. With it, it's just not even possible if my distance is right. If my distance is wrong, and the Secret Service really did allow that guy to climb up on that building, that doesn't seem like something that Trump would allow, that level of his incompetence with his people. And I haven't heard him, criticizing the Secret Service. So I think we don't know the whole story. The thing is, I think that God is in this. And I think that the way that nations change is when wise leaders capitalize on events. And I think that we're about ready to hit second and third and fourth gear. And I think that the storm that Donald Trump talked about in the Oval Office so many years ago, when he said, what's that? And the press goes, what is it, Mr. President? And he goes, I think it's the calm before the storm. And they go, what? He goes, I think it's the calm before the storm. I think the storm is about ready to come upon us. And I think the thing is I've taken a long time to tell that story, and here's what I'm trying to say. Kim Clement says that we're at the beginning, and we're now even in his lifetime, he said we were in the middle of an apostolic reformation. I think that we are in the middle of an apostolic reformation, a reformation of a rebuilding of America. And it's going to have different governance. It's going to have a different church. We're going to have a different level of apostolic power. We're going to have a different level of prophetic knowledge. And I'm going to tell you that I think that this thing I'm going to tell you came from a person in the Patriot community that's questionable. But after he said it, I decided to look at it, and I've decided that Castro took over Cuba through tickling the ears of the people and revealing information to them. If somebody was going to take over America on the good side and they were on the right side, you would want to come back to a constitutional country, a representative republic, the way our founding fathers laid it out. They prayerfully laid it out. And I've got a book on the Federalist Papers. I'm not a history major. I don't understand it all, but everybody from Jefferson to Washington to Franklin, they all wrestled with what our republic, our constitutional republic should look like, and the tension and the balance of powers. And I believe that what's going on is, I think Project 2025 is actually an extremely legitimate idea that I really want you to look into. And you might be going, oh, Larry, that's just like, I can't believe it, Well, I've always thought good things about the Heritage Foundation, but I was all ready to throw them out the window, just thinking they're another woke corporation like Tractor Supply, or I think John Deere's going woke now. Who could believe that? Budweiser, which, wasn't a fan. Maybe you were, but, I don't enjoy beer. But anyway, I was thinking that, they're just a woke organization. But after reading it and spending quite a bit of time, a number of hours, I've gone through every single thing that I really am curious about. You know what they say and there's another thing. One of the funny things that's behind it, and this is a quote of Rush Limbaugh, because I was a ditto head back in the day, and he said, the left will always let you know what they're thinking by what they hate. And my wife doesn't tell me a lot about what her friends do, but she actually found a lot of humor in one of her leftist friends, who was a good friend in high school at church. And this girl just complains about Project 25 on Facebook to such a degree, I found it curious, so that when I had this patriot person mention Project 2025, I thought, that's the thing that this leftist absolutely hates. If the left really hates it, and it's possible that Trump isn't criticizing it, is Trump going to say, hey, everybody, Project 2025 is my idea, I want to do it? I mentioned a few days ago or weeks ago on a video, I might have done that with a local thing, maybe it wasn't on the channel, but I talked about Agenda 2030, and about how that's a governmental plan of incrementally squeezing us, and it's wreaking havoc on us. And I actually think it had to be written so that all the government entities could, begin to follow it simultaneously. And so after thinking about what I learned about Castro, what I think about that, I think the most brilliant thing that could happen is to put the truth of a plan of how to get us back to a constitutional America in a written form, and then let that come to people. And I want to be somebody who's going to say, you know what, I've read it, I haven't found anything I didn't like about it. When it came to like the Department of Education, they're like, disband it. Federal funding needs to go to the states, and the states where there's more, bureaucrats need to stop controlling this. And so the leftists are absolutely having a cow because they don't understand hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is a fancy word for how do you interpret writings? And the Constitution, in my opinion, is not an alive document that needs to continue to be reformed and understood for what we understand it. We have to understand it the way they understood it, just like the Bible properly presented. We need to understand what the original authors and what the original listeners heard. And their cultural references matter. And we need to get back to a constitutional republic that is based upon what Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and George Washington and John Hancock and all those other people were shooting for. And we've become so disjointed. As I read Project 2025, I'm really convinced that it's the real deal. I think it's a plan of heavenly blessed thought that directs us back to what we really need to get to, the Constitution. And so what I want you to do is I want you to check it out. I want you to critically review it, and I want you to begin to read about it. I've read about the EPA. I've read about the Department of Education. It goes through every single major governmental agency, and it says what they would recommend and what they would do with it. And all the ones I hate, they say they're going to get rid of. And I've said that I believe prophetically we're headed towards a gold-backed currency. Guess what? Project 2025 advocates for that theoretical idea. Doesn't exactly describe it. It chooses numbers that are not real numbers, but it just conceptually helps people think of, hey, if we went to a commodity-backed dollar, what would it look like? It talks about things that are like NESARA. That's the National Economic and Recovery Act. I can't remember. NESARA advocates for debt. Kim Clement advocates for debt relief. There's no doubt that Kim Clement advocates for debt relief. NESARA talks about it. I see NESARA in Project 2025. No wonder the left is totally losing it. The reason I feel like I'm supposed to bring it to you is, what if this is true? What if this is a written document? It's almost 1,000 pages. And so, but you can break it off piece by piece. It's PDF. It's available at heritagefoundation.org. And I would go there and I would begin to look at it and I would sign up like I did. I signed up for it and then I submitted my resume. I'm not looking to get paid to do anything, but I want to help. And, I don't care if they don't call me, but I want to make a difference, because what I feel like I'm supposed to do is encourage you that I think you've got a God-given destiny on your life to make a difference where you're planted. I believe God's going to bring you money. I believe he's increasing your voice. I believe our government, the way that Brandy Potter kind of simply but eloquently described, our government is going to change. They talk about tremendous change. It's not going to be bureaucrats. I mean, that really leads to the deep state when you've got these implanted, appointed bureaucrats that will just non-relinquish of power, and they control budgets and they push agendas that are not of the current elected individuals. And we have to get back to a constitutional government. And I think Project 2025 is it's a plan. And Kim Clement said that God has a plan. And he says it's a good plan. It's such an amazing plan that could only have come from the mind of God. And I think that Project 2025 is something that you should look at, that you should embrace, and that I hope that advocates of the wealth transfer would cooperate with a new government who wants to get us back to the constitutional government. And even though Donald Trump wisely is acting like he doesn't know about it and he didn't advocate it, I don't think he did, but I think his friends did, and I think his friends know about it, and I think he actually knows about it. And so that's a little bit of an interesting thing. I think that's part of the plan, So that's my long-winded story. And I hope that we're good enough friends that you can deal with truth. So have a good one.